years ago when I was there, you know,
Mary, I don't know. Do you want to have tea? With mine, you see, you can if you want to.
oh, like a conventional one.
The other way around. No. You got the viewfinder.
Yeah.
Oh, smile then. Right there.
We had some sandwiches, Mum. Do you want a sandwich or anything? Got any more? No? All right. I'll leave room for the cakes.
Yeah, not a lot of contrast.
Should have been more organised and done it when I was at home. I want to show the detail on.
The cake and its creator.
I just told Bob that we were courting, and then I have to go and leave you on your own and join the army. But you enjoyed army life. She was with me for 30 years in the army.
Travelling around?
That's right, yes. Hang on, Bob. You can cut this bit, okay? Yes. And so I joined the army as a national serviceman, and after brief training was soon in the Royal Military Police at Inkerman Barracks, Woking. It was in 1926 a female workhouse, but it was instigated during the war as a barracks. We still said it was a workhouse. Anyway, we did our training and we went to Hamburg and went through the ranks of Lance Corporal and eventually I attained the high rank of Sergeant in charge of an anti-vice squad in Hamburg. And this is where Frida joined me after we got married, a brief marriage in Long Levens in Gloucester, and the good lass joined me after travelling from Gloucester to Harwich, to the Hook of Holland on a troop ship, and all the way around Germany to the city of Hamburg, and then gets off at the wrong station. But I tell you what, I soon found her, and we had a nice, lovely married quarters, and we started enjoying family life. And in 1954, Jacqueline, our first daughter, was born. And in 1955, Carol was born. And by this time, we were now scheduled to move to Hanover, and then on to Oldenburg. And in 1957, I got a very nice posting to Jamaica. Can we have a rest there, can we? Yes, Jamaica, Sheila.
Right.
That's where I finished up.
Oh, it must have been lovely there.
Oh, and hot.
Oh, very
got-
hot.
The first day I got sunburnt in Jamaica, which was a military offence, but I wore a string vest and I got sunburnt in neat little rows all the way along my back there. Anyway, with Frida by my side and the two girls keeping us busy, because they were only very, very young, we started enjoying life, going to the beach and going up the mountains and catching butterflies and all sorts of things. When I was off duty, I had something like 35 local military police to command, and got up to all sorts of variety of duties. There were just 2 sergeants of us in the West Indies, and that was all to
Just the two.
discipline the British troops. The Worcestershire Regiment was one of them, your dad's old regiment, or your granddad's old
Grandad.
regiment. And I was there for 3.5 years. And when I flew back home, now by this time Robert was born. And he's the poor chap who's got 4 birth certificates because he was born in a local hospital. But nevertheless, now came the time to come home with our new grandson to show the grandparents. And we came via New York, and I saw my sister Molly
New York.
for about 2 hours. And we landed at Heathrow or somewhere in London, I can't quite remember, where Frida saw mother and father outside the green gates at the customs office and rushed forward whilst I was trying to persuade the customs bloke that I didn't have any duty to pay on this brand new camera that I had bought. By which time the chief customs officer arrested Frida and brought her back to me and said, "Is this your husband? Is this your wife, sir?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Stay with your husband, ma'am," very sharply. Have a break there, Bob? So here we were back in England for a spot of leave, and Frida's parents really mothering over the grandson Robert, and I'm waiting for my next posting.
And where are you off to next, Wack?
I was going to Northern Ireland, but that was in peaceful times, and what a peaceful country it was too. And we had a lovely time there in Northern Ireland, and I was then promoted in 1963 to Staff Sergeant, the honourable rank with a crown above the stripes. But 2 years later I was posted again to Dusseldorf as Quartermaster Sergeant in charge of all the stores and so forth. But kept pretty busy, Sheila, yeah.
All right.
Yes, okay. So, and then of course I stayed in Northern Ireland for 2 years, and I got a posting back to Germany again in Dusseldorf as a quartermaster sergeant in charge of the stores. By this time I had got a keen interest in motor rallying, and had had some success, and went back to Germany when I was put in charge of an advanced driver training team, and came back to England for 8 weeks for advanced driver training with the Metropolitan Police School at Hendon. And I'd already been a driver of some 16 years. What could they teach me? And I tell you what, it was surprising. I knew nothing about skid pans and how to control a vehicle in a skid and so forth. And I went back to Germany and I formed this advanced driver training team and ran it for 2 years. Cut. And it was in 1965 when a friend of mine, we entered with a military Mini into the International Police Rally at Liège, and we won the Mini class.
Oh, very good.
And I have a lovely cup at home to prove that. But in 1966, Frida and I were off again from Germany to Cyprus.
Right,
I
very
went on
nice.
promotion, now a company sergeant major, and went to Cyprus to be the sergeant major of a large company, including a large dog section. And there we had a lovely time, and all the kids came with us and went to the military school at Cyprus, and they thoroughly enjoyed it. Swimming, this is where Robert learned to swim in about 5 minutes flat.
Really?
And we thoroughly enjoyed it. Looking around at Famagusta, Nicosia, northern part of Cyprus, Kyrenia, up the top of Stravonoloni to see the monks, and we had a thoroughly good time, didn't we?
Yeah.
But in 1965, promoted again to Regimental Sergeant Major.
Well, where are you off to now, Wack?
We're back to Germany, aren't we? Back to Germany, to the Regimental Sergeant Major of 1 division. This is the division that was supposed to meet the Russians, if I'm allowed to say Russians.
Why not?
With orders to go forward, but there were never any orders to come back again. And it perturbed me quite a bit. But nevertheless, we did the job, and we were in Verdun for 2 years. The girls went to the girls' boarding school at Wilhelmshaven, and followed by Robert eventually. And we even now in the old comrades of Wilhelmshaven boarding school, they often communicate with each other, and some of them even turned up for poor old Carol's funeral. Cuts. And of course by this time, you see, I've already now got about 20 years service in, and I have never been posted to England.
Never to England?
Never to England. So I applied for a posting that when I finished with 1 division, I could go back to England. And I had a posting come back to Chichester.
Oh, very good.
But nevertheless, it only lasted about a fortnight when the big chief of police wanted to see me in the headquarters, and I went up there, and he said, I want you to go to Berlin. And I said, you can't. I'm going to Chichester in England. And I showed him the bit of paper which he ripped up in front of my face. He says, you're going to Berlin. I said, I want to go home. I don't even know where the bloody M1 runs, sir. And he said, I'll tell you where it starts, Mr. Poole, in Berlin. And so we went to Berlin. Robert was still in boarding school, so were the girls, and we went to Berlin. And that was quite a very interesting, and I'm glad I was commanded to go. I was very pleased to be there, with contact with the Russian forces 3 or 4 times a year, to be in charge of their parade ground. When I said jump, they jumped. When I said sit, they sat. And we had a wonderful time. We used to go over to the east part of Berlin, to the operas, see Fiddler on the Roof and all that sort of thing. Jackling left the boarding school to go to England to train as a physiotherapist, as you well know. And Carol left school to become a typist at the Spandau prison where Hess was lodged before he died. And poor old Robert's still in boarding school. But he didn't want to stay there on his own, so we found him a boarding school at Brackley in England. And we brought him over. And on the way over, I thought I'd try and find a house, because surely this is coming to the end of my army life. And we went to all sorts of places, including Lincoln, where we eventually bought a house in Lincoln. Cuts. Okay, but nevertheless, we were still back in Berlin, but I really wanted to settle down. I perhaps had enough of army life, and I became an avid reader of House Purchaser and House Hunter and so forth. And eventually I sent this builder in Lincoln a £25 postal order to seal a house in Lincoln.
Was this a new house?
Yes, being built. We had never seen it. We knew the street. It was called Malvern Avenue.
Oh, very local.
Quite a local one, yes. And so came the time to move, and Robert was in boarding school in Brackley, so the move was fairly simple. I came home to this brand new house that had been prepared for us. There wasn't a thing in it, no furniture, nothing whatsoever. Absolutely empty. Frida joined us 3 days later with Carol by air, and we were hunting around for fridges and cookers and 3-piece suites and so forth, and we eventually bought a 3-piece suite in Newark, which was a town just outside Lincoln. About 15 minutes after we bought it, we were on our way home very slowly, knowing we were going to sit in an armchair that day, when we saw it flying past on a low loader, and we had to race home to get after it. And it was a lovely bungalow, three bedrooms and a detached garage and everything. And I had 3 weeks to prepare this house and lay a lawn back and front, and then get myself to Northern Ireland yet again, because
to
by
Northern
this
Ireland.
time I had been granted a captain quartermaster's commission. So now I am an officer and I have to do all sorts of things and leave my good wife and family and go to Northern Ireland. And now, of course, this was the Northern Ireland in troubled times. So I had to be very careful. Cut. Of course, at this time, changing from Berlin to Lincoln and now going to Northern Ireland, I had also acquired a set of golf clubs. I'd never played golf really seriously. We'd hit a few balls around a football club and so forth. And here I was sorting out my fishing tackle at the backyard in Lincoln when Frida came out. You remember this, Bob, don't you? And said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm taking me fishing rods to Northern Ireland." Now I'm a lone fisherman and she knew that I would be wandering down the rivers all on my own, and she was extremely worried. "Why don't you take those golf clubs and get somebody to show you how to play golf?" So I put the fishing tackle away, I took the golf clubs and went to Northern Ireland and reported for duty.
Golf was to become a great hobby of yours.
It was on the
later.
first day I arrived when I reported to the colonel who welcomed me to the regiment and said, "What are you going to do with your spare time, Ivor, if you have any?" I said, "I'd like to take up the game of golf." "Just the chap we want for tomorrow's match," he said. And I'd never been on a golf course in my life.
Dear.
But we went to make up the team, and what's more, we won. And I hadn't
Jolly
got the
good.
foggiest idea what I was doing. That was
Your first
my
golf.
first golf practice, or golf game, yes. Cut. Sorry about that, though. So here we were in Northern Ireland with Frida and the family in England, Jacqueline at Aylesbury doing physiotherapy training, Robert still at Brackley in boarding school, and Carol getting a little job in Lincoln with the Building Society. Made friends with the builder's son,
Oh.
and we thought there was some interest there, but it didn't materialize. But when I got home, Frida was saying, "This is a cold, cold place to live, Lincoln. Very flat, very uninteresting in certain respects." And so I decided that I'd like to move further south. And the opportunity came when I was finished with Northern Ireland and posted to Chichester, an English posting at last.
Oh, you got to Chichester.
1973 that was, yes. Okay, yeah. You will have fun editing this, but don't cut too much out. Now this was in the 1973 era, and I served in Northern Ireland as the quartermaster of the 1st Regiment, and eventually got posted in 1975 to Chichester, an English posting at last. But this only lasted 10 months and I was away again, back to Germany, to Mönchengladbach, to take up command, or second in command, of a police company. Cuts. Okay. But whilst I was at Chichester, I took the opportunity to look around to find a house, and down in Chichester in the south of England, it was much warmer than Lincoln, and Frida would come down on odd weekends and view houses, and there was a beautiful house in Chichester which I rather liked, and I took Frida to see it. We went upstairs to look at the bathroom, and this is where the house owner said there was a bit of history about the place. Years ago somebody had been murdered in the bath that we were looking at.
Oh dear.
And I said to Frida on the landing, "This would be a good topic for a supper party." When I looked round, she'd gone. She'd run downstairs and jumped in the car, "Don't want to buy that house," and that was it, finished. But eventually we found a nice house in Wigan Crescent, and that's where we're still living now. And we eventually moved down, with Jacqueline still away, Robert still in boarding school, Carol giving us a hand to move. Unfortunately, when we arrived with the furniture van outside the house, she jumped out of the van and broke her ankle.
Oh dear.
But nevertheless, we moved down to Wigan Crescent, where we've been there ever since. Cuts. But it was in Mönchengladbach, in this company, that I heard that a quartermaster of the military police was to be made redundant. So I phoned a friend of mine up in the headquarters who confirmed it and sent me down some advance instructions. And so there were only 4 military police quartermasters in the whole of the British Army, and I knew exactly where everyone was and what they were doing, and I thought I'd stand a good chance to get this redundancy and somebody can pay me to come out of the army. I hope this doesn't fall into improper hands. Anyway, cut whatever you think like, yeah. And so I applied for redundancy and I was successful on conditions that I went back to Northern Ireland for the last year of my service until they could find relief to swap all around. But eventually in 1979, 1980, I retired. And that was my army career finished, back home again. By this time, Jacqueline had got married, Robert had got married, and Frida and Carol were home in Wigan Crescent.
In Bedhampton.
But now you see, I found plenty of time to visit my old friends and my old good cousin Sheila in Corse, and look up all the old family history, of which I'm extremely interested in because I had lost touch with everybody. And in 1996, after all that hard work, I had a heart attack, but I recovered, thank goodness. And a few years later, I had a pacemaker fitted. You can have a look at it sometime, Sheila. And by good care and attention from Frida here, I recovered, and the pacemaker made a whole heap of difference. And in between then, after standing down from the army, what the hell?
Hang on.
All right there.
Okay, so in 1980, I retired from the army, and to some degree, I was glad. I'd done my bit for nearly 30 years, and I was glad to be home with my family. But I got a little job at Highbury College of Technology as the store supervisor. It was a piece of cake. But I did that for about 8 years, and then got a little job with the Black Horse letting agencies, looking after their rented houses. But nevertheless, I thought time I stood down, and in 1995 I gave up work altogether. Then I suddenly found, how did I manage all this work and garden at home whilst I was at work? But I had done my bit, and I stood down. But a few months later, I had a minor heart attack which didn't develop into anything serious, and after the wonderful attention from Frida, I recovered, and eventually I had a pacemaker to settle things down, and this is supposed to last me another 10 years. I'm looking forward to that. Cut.
So what did you do then, Wack?
Well, my son gave me a computer, and I suddenly became interested in family history. And of course this brought me back even more frequently to see my good pal Sheila,
good to see you, Wack.
who brought out the family case from the attic to recover old photographs and old memorabilia, and we really went to town with it.
Oh, the case often had to come down from
And
the
I
roof.
made many visits to Corse, and was glad to make old friends and visit the old church where my carving, my bit of vandalism behind the organ is still there. Made my old friends with Andrew Compton, and after 60 or 70 years, he was the chap who told me that when I went to the bakery to see my mother, who was the washerwoman in the village, and she said, if you want one of Andrew Compton's cakes, he was the baker's son, you got to fill the water tanks in the attic. And I had to use this pump and pump and pump and pump until I filled the tanks. I didn't know at the time. It took so long, because then I found out Andrew Compton had run around the house turning all the blasted taps on.
Oh no.
But nevertheless, we rejuvenated our friendship, and I spent many, many years with him. But he is dead now. Here in 2013, Frida and I celebrated our diamond wedding, only the other day, and Wacker Poole is still going strong. So, okay. So here we are again, you see, back with Sheila after our diamond wedding party. We all had a jolly good time, and we're going to feed the chickens a little bit, and we'll call it a day. But nice to set my piece. Now you know all about Wacker. Come on, Bob, let's go and feed the chickens. Come on. Yeah, cheerio then. This is a photograph of my grandmother's diamond wedding in 1948. The top picture is the group who attended the party, and the bottom picture is the Barnfield family that you heard so much about. This is a photograph of my grandmother Hester Barnfield and my granddad Jack. The top picture is the family group, and the bottom picture is the Barnfield group, the Barnfield family that you've heard me mention so many times, including Sheila, who is probably the only remaining Barnfield, certainly in this village. I'm now going to show you some pictures of a diamond wedding of my grandmother that was taken in 1948. The one you're looking at now is the group of the Barnfield family, and this one is the group of people who attended the party, including the Barnfields, the Pooles, and all her friends and so forth. Cut. And this picture shows my wedding to Frida Crowther, and also shows my mum and dad and Frida's mum and dad and all the bridesmaids and the best man. And here's Frida and I on our marriage day, and lasted 60 years and 3 days as of today.
Sorry, I moved. That was my fault.
All right, okay.
Don't do it again.
Sorry, Wack. Take 2.
And this is a picture of Frida and I on our marriage day in 1953. Cut.
Thank you, Wack. Yep.